Hello, everyone, and welcome back. To open this session, I would like to invite Chairwoman of the Board of Governors, Ms. Dafna Meitar-Nechmad, to say a few remarks.
Okay, I missed you all. Distinguished and speakers, governors, friends, and guests, welcome to this very special session. Hi, Ariel. But before we jump in, I want to remind everyone here that Tel Aviv University has what was the first and is now the leading academic faculty of arts in Israel. Yes. We have film, theater, music, architecture, art history, and a beautiful art gallery. Our programs are academically rigorous, but also experimental and practical. And we have arguably the greatest collective influence in Israel on arts and culture in all its forms. Now, any topic connected to October 7 is a sensitive one, triggering feelings of anguish, sadness, and pain. The title itself is an understatement, a date, not expressing how horrible that day really was. Yet, out of the horrors of October 7th sprang immediate creative responses, which is a good thing, because artistic expression helps us connect with and process our rawest emotions and fears. Many artists reacted instinctively, using their work to process the shock and trauma. For instance, the painter Zoya Cherkesky created drawings inspired by the brutal attack at the Nova Festival. Graphic designers and cartoonists like Michael Kishke shared powerful, heartbreaking images, all in an effort to make sense of something so painful and overwhelming. It wasn't just professional artists who responded. People from all backgrounds turned to art. Hosted Square became a central spot where individuals displayed artwork that was raw, emotional, and sometimes simple, but always heartfelt. Art became a way to cope, share, and speak out. Cultural institutions like museums, galleries, operas, orchestras, and theaters responded more cautiously. Their approach was usually indirect, choosing to explore themselves related to the events rather than the events themselves. They had exhibitions that didn't directly reference October 7th or its aftermath, but that featured works that dealt with trauma, war, and death. In documentary film, creators like Yariv Mozer, a TAU alumnus who is speaking today, were quick to act. He began filming in the Western Negev shortly after the events, which led to his documentary, We Will Dance Again, screened all over the world. Even Barbara Streisand posted about it. I am sure he will tell us about the work and its reception. Architecture also became a form of expression. In the early days, spontaneous, informal memorials appeared. A year later, official monuments were established in places like Sderot and Jerusalem, marking a shift from immediate response to formal commemoration. What is still unclear is how October 7 and the war might change creative expression in Israel going forward. Artists will no doubt completely rethink the aesthetics they employ and the narrative they tell. There will be no doubt be arguments about explicitness, good taste, and ethics, because Well, because we are an argumentative people, but also because for some, brutality should not be art-washed, and national tragedy should not be beautified. For many of us, encouraging art that explores October 7 trauma will be too painful, and for others, cathartic and releasing. It's hard to say right now when we are still in the heat of the moment. Our hostages are still captive, our soldiers still fighting. Right now, we will hear from artists themselves about how, from their point of view, they found their creative spark under fire, and how they see artistic expression evolving in Israel in the immediate future and beyond. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Dafna. Indeed, since the October 7th attacks, Israel's vibrant arts scene has served as a mirror for the pain and sorrow felt by millions of Israelis. And today we're going to be hearing from 3 leading Israeli artists on how the aftermath of the attacks and the ongoing wars have impacted their work. And so our first speaker today, Mr. Yariv Mozer, an independent filmmaker. He's an Israeli Film Academy Award winner for his documentary Ben Gurion Epilogue in 2017, and an Israeli TV Academy Award winner for Amazon Prime's TV series The Devil's Confession, The Lost Eichmann Tapes in 2022, which was co-produced with Kan 11 and MGM Television. And recently, he's a winner of American Television Academy Honors Award. And as of last week, he's nominated for an Emmy Award for his new documentary, We Will Dance Again, in 2024. Absolutely. This was co-produced by Paramount Plus, Hot 8, Sipul, MGM Studios, Bitachon 365, and the BBC. And if you haven't seen the documentary, the film, I urge you all to go and take the time and watch it. Yariv is also a board member of the Israeli Academy of Film and Television and a teacher here at Tel Aviv University's Tisch Film School. Yariv, please.
Thank you very much. Toda Rabba. Board of Governors, guests, Mr. President, thank you so much for being here. It's a big honor. To all of you, as a graduate of this university and as a teacher, I firstly want to thank you all for the support. It is very meaningful for us as a staff here and as a former student. Today I will speak about We Will Dance Again, the film which was just described, and I will show a few clips. And I will start by saying, how did I get to do this film? So on the 7th of October, like everyone, I was sitting in my apartment in Tel Aviv watching the news, and I was asking myself, where should I be as a documentary filmmaker to be in a place where I will have the meaning, where I'll be able to express myself, where I'll be able to see the things as close as possible. Now, it was impossible just to get into your car and drive south. And I happen to know personally the IDF spokesperson, former spokesperson, Brigadier General Daniel Hagari, who became very famous since then. So I started texting him, Hagari, I know that you're giving priority now to news journalists, but you know documentaries, I know they will come out last, but this is what will be part of history. Please let me get as close as possible. After 2 days, I was joined by a commando unit into the site of the massacre of the Nova Music Festival. I was, I think, the first with a video camera to be there on site. Everything was still just as it was on the 7th of October. The bomb shelter was still filled with blood. The smell was horrible. The images were as nothing I've seen in my life. And this was the beginning of this documentary, We Will Dance Again. On the evening of that day, I've pitched the project to MGM Television, who worked with me on The Devil's Confession. And unexpectedly, really, they decided the morning after, together with Sipur Studios here in Israel and Hot 8, the documentary channel, Slutsky Productions, to join a co-production, American-Israeli. Later on, Fulwell, Bitachon 365 joined the production from the UK, and they achieved bringing on the BBC as co-producers. And finally, Paramount Plus decided to join as well, and it became an international co-production. I will begin with inviting you to watch the trailer for the film, and then I will continue and tell you more about it, please.
I'm never going to be the person that I was before the 7th of October.
The Nova party was amazing. I've not seen anything remotely close to that in years in Israel. 3,500 people went to dance for peace and for love.
I see a bunch of people looking up to the sky.
ואז אני מסתכל ימינה ואני רואה זרקורים של אור מגיעים מרחוק.
The most rockets I've ever seen in my life from Gaza. I thought to tell my friends to leave, but it was already too late.
And then I heard the first bullet.
אולי יש פה חוליית מחבלים.
ופשוט אני מרגיש את הכדורים מעל הראש שלי.
אני אפול על הרצפה, אני אתחזה למת.
אני מתחבאת פה בתוך המקרר. אני הולכת למות היום.
Everyone is trying to call some authority. No one was really answering.
איך אין פה צבא? איך אין פה צבא? לא אכפת לי למות, כאילו, כמו שזה פחד על המשפחה שלי. אני לא מגיעה להם לקבור ילדה.
I remember seeing a terrorist with a Hamas symbol on his head, and he was smiling, like it was a game.
אחד מ9 אנשים פשוט כאילו לא שרד שם. העתיד שלם שהיה לי בידיים. ניפסו לי.
הזרחה הראשונה שראיתי הייתה יפה, ואז הזרחה השנייה שראיתי הייתה פשוט נוראית.
I'm never going to be the person that I was before the 7th of October, and I'm trying to figure out who I'm going to be now.
Every single person that I lost on that day would have made the hell out of this life. And for them, I need to continue living.
The first thing I did, together with a group of researchers, on the 2 months after, it took us 2 months to gather and collect survivors from the Nova massacre. We decided to interview as many people as possible, hearing as many stories as possible to get the picture of what happened on that day, on this specific massacre, on this terror attack, from as many points of view as possible. And after gathering the survivors that will participate in the film, we of course had to make sure that they want and can cope with being in front of the camera. We had a psychologist on the set. We collected the footage from them. Many of them, the survivors themselves, used their own cell phones to capture those horrific moments. And this helped us to portray what happened on that specific terror attack of the Nova Music Festival. But not only this. I insisted on putting my hands on the GoPro cameras of Hamas. I knew it will be hard to watch, but this will be an evidence that the world could not deny what happened on the 7th of October. And although, and I'll be very frank, the Israeli military and Israeli police did not collaborate with us and did not give us access to this footage, we used connections. You know, it's Israel finally. So people know people, and we got those files, video files from mainly those GoPro cameras from the terrorists, which is horrific to see that they were keen to capture those moments as they are doing them. So the film is built from the interviews from the survivors and the footage that brings those 2 points of view on the same moments that the survivors are describing. The next clip I want to present to you is from the moments before. It was a party, like every party. It was a festival. This is why any young person from outside of Israel can relate with this film. It was an international music festival happening in Israel. And those moments before the attack were moments of joy. But another thing that was very important for me was to show that, like in any rave music festival, there was also the use of drugs. And those young people are sharing frankly, sincerely, that they were using drugs. And they were under the influence of drugs, like in any rave. And I'm not judgmental towards their decision to use drugs. But this was very hard for them to cope with this terror attack under the influence of drugs, and this is why it was so important for me to have it inside the documentary. Let's see the moments before the attack. The attack began at 6:29 in the morning.
כמו לחכות ליריית פתיחה של המרוץ. אנשים מתכננים כביכול את הסם לזריחה. אתה מבין? כי הזריחה זה באמת השיא. אז אני פותח את השקית, אני שם עוד MD, מחזקים, כיף.
There's something about the moment that the sun rises, that you suddenly see the people around you, that you suddenly see the smiles, and that the energy comes together. You can actually see the dance floor moving into a place. I was on the stage, so I could actually see it. I looked at the person next to me, and we were both like, wow.
This is a test of frequency instruments, bass, drums, distortion, artifacts.
דוד מתקרחן באמצע הרחבה, רוקד, כולו שמח.
ואז אני מסתכל ימינה ואני רואה זרקורים של אור מגיעים מרחוק.
I see a bunch of people looking up to the sky. Okay, probably just like seeing the sun rise or something.
הולכת עם חברה שלי, אומרת לי, יו, אולי לי, יש פה זיקוקים, איך הם השקיעו השנה בתפאורה.
מה יש לך? זה זיקוקים, אחי, שחרר, אתה סתם מסתות.
ואז אני מסתכלת. זיקוקים זה לא.
The last video I took from my phone was at 6:28 in the morning. It was the last drop that he played. The moment that I stopped filming, someone grabbed my hand and showed me the sky. We yelled into the crowd, Seva Adom, Seva Adom. Everyone scattered. It was like a screen coming up from the sky of rockets, just like...
The most rockets I've ever seen in my life.
זה נהיה טירוף. בשנייה, כאילו, הכל התהפך.
או, פאק! בוא נעמוד ליד משהו, בוא. וואו, מה הולך? להשתטח על הרצפה, ידיים על הראש.
We laid on the ground. I was honestly scared. You're in an open field, there's rockets everywhere. Nothing is stopping these rockets from falling exactly where I am right now.
הם התחילו לרוץ בכל המקום, אף אחד לא יודע איפה יש מרחב מוגן, אף אחד לא יודע מה לעשות, אנשים דלוקים.
כולם בסטלות.
זה אמיתי, זה לא אמיתי, אף אחד לא מבין כלום.
וואו! כמה יכולים? נפתח לי החיים באמא. יואו, אני בשוק. אמא טוב.
One of the hardest stories from this terror attack, and you probably heard, was for those who were in those bomb shelters scattered near the roads next to where this terror attack happened. As you can see, the south of Israel is used to those barrages of rocket attacks, and you have those bomb shelters. And some of the partygoers decided to stop their car and just find a shelter in those tiny bomb shelters, which became a trap, because when the terrorists arrived, they just trapped those kids inside those bomb shelters. There were many bomb shelters. In one of them, our Eurovision song competitor, Yuval, was in one of those bomb shelters. But the one I'm describing here in the film is of a different story, and you probably heard about Hirsch Goldberg Polin, who was in this bomb shelter. And let's hear of those moments of fear and terror when the terrorists arrived to this bomb shelter.
הנר אמר, מעדכן אתכם בכל מה שאני רואה, יש פה שתי טנדרים, זה לא צה"ל, יש להם קלצ'ניקוב, לא נראה טוב. ממש כמה שניות אחרי זה, הוא מסתכל החוצה ואומר, הם פה.
A group of people jump out, screaming in Arabic.
الله أكبر! الله أكبر! هيهم الكلاب هيهم! حط جوه حط هيا سير.
אוסאמה צעק, הם הולכים להרוג אותנו, הם הולכים להרוג אותנו, הם הולכים להרוג אותנו, אמרתי לכם לברוח. ופה התחלנו להבין שאוקיי, רגע. מה, מי הולך להרוג אותנו? מה קורה?
Anil tried to calm everyone down as much as possible, and then they started firing at the entrance of the Migunit. The Bedouin, he went outside and he tried to talk to them in Arabic. They did horrible things to him and murdered him in the end. Everyone in the Migunit was trying to call some authority, Mada or the cops or the army or someone. No one was really answering.
אני חושבת שעברו 30 שניות עד ששמענו את הפלק הראשון של הרימון בתוך המיגונית.
And then I see Anil just pick them up and toss them out. And he does that once, and then they throw another one in. Every time they threw in a grenade, he just grabbed it, tossed it out. He acted like a commander. He took all the responsibility on himself. He was focused. He understood that he had a mission. All he was looking for was to fight, to stay alive. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this kid is throwing live grenades. I don't think that I've ever heard of anyone ever doing that. I know how dangerous this is. I think there's a chance that he's not the only one that's gonna have to do this. And I kind of get myself ready for the point where if something happens to him, that I'm gonna have to pick up what he left.
8 פעמים בעצם הרימון מתגלגל לתוך המיגונית, הנר תופס את הרימון וזורק אותו חזרה החוצה, וברימון התשיעי הרימון התפוצץ בתוך המיגונית.
There was a really big explosion, and I flew back. Someone flew on me. And when I finally got up, I remember Anil wasn't standing anymore. He wasn't with us. Hirsch lost his hand. He was just sitting there. He said, I lost my hand. I don't have my hand. And he was trying to like tie it off. At that point, I kind of realized that someone's gonna have to continue what he started. And then I remember a grenade flying in, just landing right in front of me. And you could see the flame coming out of the top of the grenade. And it was a few inches, and I remember getting smaller and smaller. And I just picked up the grenade and threw it out. And I'm not sure how many of those there were. I remember the first one, and I remember the last two. The one at the entrance, I remember I was able to throw out. But then there was an explosion. I went flying into the wall and passed out.
I know it's not an easy film to watch. It wasn't easy to make it, but I encourage you to share it with people, especially those who do not believe or don't want to see it. It's on Paramount Plus. It is available. It's on BBC in the UK and other countries. And it's important for people to watch. I want to keep you with something. Well, I'm very glad that this film received the international recognition. And as it was mentioned about Barbra Streisand, so I want to keep you with a moment of, I don't know if happiness is the right word, but there are moments in life that I will never forget. And this is the moment I want to share with you, which describes the absurdity of the way we live here. So I understand you encountered some sirens in the last 2 days, so you know exactly what you feel when you need to run to find shelter in the staircase. And this is what happened to me in one morning on Saturday, where I'm sitting with all my neighbors, and we're all there, and I'm just looking at my phone, opening Instagram, and suddenly I'm like saying out loud, "Oh my God." And all of my neighbors are saying, "What happened? What happened? What happened?" And my reaction is, Barbra Streisand watched my film. And I think that this was a moment in which I understood that this film is getting into to the eyes of people and to the recognition. And as being said, last week we got the Emmy nomination. And this week, the following week, I'm traveling to LA to receive American Academy Television Honors Award, which is very good for this film and for this film to travel and get to audiences around the world. And that is, I think, the most important thing. So thank you very much for giving me this stage. It's a big honor. I want to ask, first of all, it's a big honor to share the stage with both of you artists, and thank you so much. I need to apologize. I'm in the midst of production in Eilat, so I need to run from here and catch a flight, so I won't be here with you. But thank you so much for being here, and thank you. Toda raba.
Thank you, Yariv. Even just watching a few clips is very difficult film, but important to watch. I would now like to invite Mr. Guy Morad, a renowned illustrator, comic artist, and caricaturist, and an artist that I personally share a lot of your drawings on social media with my followers, so please, the stage is yours.
Hello everyone. I will read from the page because my English is not so good. My name is Guy Morad. Thank you. My name is Morad, and I'm an illustrator and cartoonist for the Yediot Ahronot newspaper. I'm excited to be here. It's a great honor to present a collection of my works that address the tragic events of October 7 massacre. And I will first begin. On the morning of October 7, I, along with in the entire country, woke up to a new and horrifying reality. Israelis felt a profound sense of helplessness and a loss of personal security, coupled with the perception that the army and government were in a complete shock, as if we were living in a horror movie. In those two cartoons, I aim to capture the feeling visually. This is like waiting for the Prime Minister to statement that took a few days. In the first week of the war, there was no cartoon in the newspaper. Everybody really didn't know what to do. And I couldn't paint or illustrate anything in the first few days. But after that, I really wanted to express myself. And this is the first cartoon I did after the 7 October. In the first days following the massacre, horrific image of refrigerated trucks, convoys, transporting the bodies of victims were broadcast on television. Even where the news reporter stand with the microphone, you could see the trucks, convoys, really back of them. At the same time, there was a talk of a massive reserve mobilization and preparation for war. In this cartoon, I combine both situations. On one side of the road, we see trucks with bodies, while on the opposite side, tanks rushes towards Gaza. Men, women, children, and elderly were brutally kidnapped to Gaza. In this cartoon, I sought to express the anguish of a father in the Hamas tunnels who longs for his family and children. Shani Luke was at the Nova Festival with her boyfriend. We also see her in the movie of Yariv. The video from the morning of October 7 showing her lying in a jeep surrounded by Hamas terrorists was among the most memorable from that tragic day. 2 weeks later, it emerged that she had been murdered and her body taken to Gaza. I illustrated her as an angel rising from the poster of the kidnap. In this illustration, I depicted one of the houses where horror unfolded, capturing the screams of the victims frozen in time. Since the war began, families of the kidnapped have experienced a roller coaster of emotions, swinging from hope to despair. This image of a roller coaster best represents the depressing feeling. In one interview, I heard one of the member of the family even talk and describe it like a roller coaster of emotions. So it gave me the idea to paint it like this. The shocking indifference of international organizations, especially women groups, to the horror of rape cases motivated me to illustrate them in a style that reminds the famous image of the three monkeys. But instead of monkeys, I drew the members of the International Women. Abigail Idan, a 3-year-old girl, was kidnapped alone after her parents were murdered. Abigail held American citizenship, and President Biden played a significant role in her release. On the day of her return, she celebrated her 4th birthday, and I drew President Biden give her a cake. This photo of female IDF soldiers who Hamas brutally kidnapped was published in the Daily Mail newspaper on January 25. On the same day, the International Criminal Court in Hague issued a statement alleging that Israel was committing war crimes in Gaza. UNRWA employees, an organization established by the United Nations to assist the residents of Gaza, actively participated in the massacre and looting. Shiri Bibas and her 2 young children, 4-year-old Ariel and 1-year-old Kfir, were brutally kidnapped from their home in Kibbutz Nir Oz. The image of Shiri crying and holding her 2 children while being surrounded by Hamas terrorists became one of the symbols of October 7. The question of their fate troubled many until it was finally revealed that Hamas had murdered all 3 in captivity. Their bodies were returned to Israel during the second hostages deal. And this cartoon shows how little time we have left to free them. Shlomo Mansour, who was kidnapped from his home in Kibbutz Kisufim, was the oldest hostages. He had survived the horror of the Farhud in Iraq as a child, immigrated to Israel, and was one of the founders of Kibbutz Kisufim. Hamas returned his body during the second hostages deal. In the early day of the war, his family asked me to create an illustration depicting the cup of coffee he didn't have time to drink before his kidnapping. His daughter sent me this picture that they did before in this morning. I illustrated the despair and frustration over the women and men held in the tunnels, emphasizing the urgency for their release. I drew a scene from the first Seder night in captivity, illustrating Kfir and Ariel Bibas singing Man Ishtana. At that time, there was still hope that they were alive. On Holocaust Memorial Day, I usually draw a symbolic cartoon. However, after October 7, I felt compelled to connect my Holocaust Memorial Day cartoon with the suffering experienced by the Israeli settlement around the Gaza Strip. The outrageous support expressed by some US universities, like Columbia University, in the horrific massacre carried by Hamas, along with allowing pro-Palestine students to organize demonstrations against Israel, inspired me to create a cartoon in which Hamas overtakes the university, parking its white famous Toyotas in the faculty parking lot. Many of my cartoons focused on the situation of the hostages' families, particularly their frustration and despair, like rocks that in a tunnel that block the way for an agreement. In the days leading up to the second hostages deal, when hope for an agreement felt tangible, I illustrated it as a mirage, glowing like a Fata Morgana in the desert. Einav Tsangauker, the mother of the kidnapped Matan Tsangauker, has become a symbol of the family's struggle to bring their sons back home. She is critical of the government's effort to release her son from captivity. As part of her struggle, Einav travels around the world to fight for the return of her son and the other hostages. When Prime Minister Netanyahu met President Trump in the US, Einav flew there to demonstrate outside their meeting. A month ago, we observed the second Seder night since the October 7 massacre, with 59 people still kidnapped in Gaza, 24 of whom are alive. In this illustration, one person expressed despair by saying, "This night is all maror." To conclude on somewhat optimistic note, Or Levi and his wife Einav left their son Almog with his grandparents and attended the Nova Festival. They arrived only half an hour before Hamas terrorists invaded Israel. They sought refuge in a shelter bomb with 20 other people. Actually, it was the same shelter where we saw in the movie that Aner, Shapira, and Hirsch Goldberg was. Unfortunately, after being discovered by Hamas, Einav was murdered and Hor was kidnapped and taken to Gaza with Hirsch and Elia Cohen. In the second hostages release deal on February, Hor was eventually freed and reunited with his son Almog, who had been waiting for him the whole time. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Guy. And I would now like to invite Mr. Ziv Koren, an award-winning Israeli renowned photojournalist, please.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here in front of you today. My name is Ziv Koren. I'm an Israeli photojournalist. I've been a professional photographer for almost 35 years. I started my career as a military photographer, and ever since I've been covering everything that had to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with the Israeli army, including all wars and the times of terror attacks and bombings in Israel. But I can assure you that nothing could really tell us what is coming, and talking especially about what happened here on October 7th. I woke up on a Saturday morning when my youngest daughter, 7.5 years old, was in my apartment. We woke up from sirens. my first reaction, to be very honest with you, was to think how fast can I bring her back to her mother, understanding that I need to do what I need to do. All my life I've been running to places where most people are running away from. And I find myself bringing all back to her mother, driving back to my apartment to organize my bulletproof jacket and helmet. By that time, I'm opening the television and I see the pickup trucks of Hamas entering Sderot, shooting at people. I'm looking at the television, not understanding what I'm seeing. Getting on my bike, driving to the south, meeting up with two of my colleagues, photographers in Ashkelon, to figure out what we're going to do next, because we had no idea. The roads are already blocked, and we're trying to bypass the main roads, to bypass the police barricades, going off-road, trying to reach the road, because this is what we saw on television. There is a very thin line between stupidity and bravery, I must tell you. We had no idea how dangerous what we're doing how dangerous it actually is. And at some point, we found ourselves at the entrance of Sderot. We were going to Sderot because this is what we saw on television. We had very little information at that point. I was holding a small video camera with me because I was doing this documentary for Israeli television about myself. And it turned out to be so dramatic because there is very little footage of what was photographed from the Israeli side that day. I want to start by showing a minute and a half of a video just to kind of put us in perspective of the morning of October 7th.
תקשיב, אני לא מאמין שזאת הסצנה שהיא מול עינינו. אוי ואבוי. אוי ואבוי. אוי ואבוי. טוב, האמת שזה מה שאנחנו רואים. טבח. פשוט היה פה טבח. אין דרך אחרת להסביר איך רצו פה חמאסניקים עם קלאצ'ים ופשוט טבחו פה באנשים. יש פה אנשים מבוגרים, ערימות של גופות. פשוט לא יאמן. אנחנו במלחמה הארדקור.
המועצה האזורית שער הנגב הודיעה כי ראש המועצה אופיר ליבשטיין נרצח בחילופי אש עם מחבלים.
וואי, איזה בלגן יש פה, אלוהים אדירים.
זוזו מהכביש, חבר'ה.
זהירות. אורן.
זהירות. אל תעמדו פה.
יורים עלינו? אוהד, תראה, אוהד. מי יורה? וואו. מה עושים? יורים פה. אנחנו לא יודעים מאיפה.
כל הזמן בלי הפסקה, בגלל זה על הרצפה עכשיו. לא יכולים לזוז.
פה זה כוח שהגיע של... וואו. אתה רוצה להיכנס לאוטו ולנסוע? כן. יאללה, יוצאים. סע, תן גז, תצא מהזירה. גז. סע, אל תסתכל אפילו. פשוט לתת גז.
The reason we stopped where we were confronted with the Hamas was because there was a convoy of cars on the main road. We stopped to see if there was anybody alive. There wasn't. We were going from one car to the other, all youngsters, we didn't hear anything about the Nova Party yet. We had no idea what was really going on. And while we were running away from the place where we were being shot at, we arrived to this junction, which actually looked like this. Hamas terrorists are hiding here. Every person trying to run away from the Nova Party or running away from the Gaza envelope find himself being shot at this junction. 6 Yamam elite unit fighters died here in confrontation with the Hamas. The smoke that we see here in the back is literally falling of missiles throughout the day, everywhere, like thousands of them. And from that day on, I understood the necessity of telling the story of what happened in Israel, where we experienced one of the biggest terror attacks in human history. And I understood the necessity of bringing these images to the world and explaining what happened in Israel on October 7th. This is the police station of Sderot, where they had almost a 24-hour fight where Hamas took over the station. We see tanks driving on the roads, trying to on their way to save the kibbutzim and the Gaza envelope. The confrontation with Hamas, we have to understand that this did not end on October 7th. It took between 4 to 5 days to clean the area from terrorists that were inside the kibbutzim and in the open areas. There were still civilians and soldiers who died days after October 7th from terrorists that were still on Israeli ground. When we understood that the biggest disaster actually took place in the kibbutzim, I tried as fast as I could to join one of the forces and to enter the kibbutzim. I joined the Lotar, which is the counter-terror unit of the army that were literally searching from door to door in Be'eri, kibbutz Be'eri. They're literally with their guns up because they're afraid that there are still terrorists in every one of these rooms. This is the house of Carmel Gat. Carmel was taken hostage. She was kept for 11 months. She was able to survive, and she was literally murdered in a tunnel in southern Gaza. That was the first time that we were literally exposed to the disaster that took place in the kibbutzim. We see this is the doll of Hila Rotem Shoshani, a 13-year-old girl that was kidnapped with her mother into Gaza. The doll fell on one of the roads inside the kibbutz and was left there while she was taken hostage. This is one of the bomb shelters based inside kibbutz Be'eri. It was hit by an anti-tank missile, as you can see, and the sign that fell off of it says, "Donated with love for the safety of the people of Israel." I cannot even get out of the convoy. I'm running with the soldiers, but I find myself going back, seeing the houses afterwards, and just imagine what was thrown to this house where you see the holes from the grenades that were thrown into this house. Zaka, that took responsibility of collecting the bodies out of the houses in Be'eri only, we're talking about 101 people that were murdered. That's besides the one who were taken into captivity, and that took place in all the kibbutzim in the Gaza envelope throughout the days after October 7th. Moving on to Kfar Aza kibbutz, we entered one of the houses where the soldiers are searching, and after they entered in, I joined them, and I see one of the soldiers standing in front of the challah bread and the wine that stayed on the table from the holiday that took place the day before. He just burst into tears. This is, as I said, Kfar Aza, but the neighborhood that suffered the most horrific in Kfar Aza was the neighborhood of the youngsters. And when I entered this part, there's not even one single house that there's no either kidnapped or killed from that neighborhood. And when I go to this neighborhood again and again, I've been there probably over 20 times, and I see the signs that were on every single apartment. The yellow ones are the ones that were kidnapped, and the red ones are the ones that were murdered. And we can see the apartment of Gali Berman and right next to it, the apartment of his twin brother, Ziv Berman, both still in captivity in Gaza. The Katz family in Kfar Aza, there were literally 5 family members that were executed in the house. They found them with bullets. All 5 members were killed. This is the funeral of Katz family that they got a military burial because the oldest daughter was a soldier. Going back to Kfar Aza, I returned back with hundreds of volunteers from Zaka. After completing the mission of taking out the bodies, they came back to all the apartments in the kibbutzim, in the Gaza envelope, to clean the blood and to bring it to burial. According to Judaism, you need to collect every single piece of flesh or DNA and to bring it to burial. So they're really literally cleaning the floor and moving from one house to another, collecting every piece of anything that has blood on it, including dismantling the beds, taking out the pillows and even the mattresses that are soaked with blood. They dug huge holes in the ground and buried everything together. Entering Nir Oz, there's an interesting story about this picture. That was taken on the very first days after the attack. I entered one of the houses. I had no idea who it belonged to, and I see this blood stain of a hand on the wall, and I used it, in my lectures, in the exhibitions that were shown all over the world, in the book that came out, and only recently, after Ohadia Alomi came back in a coffin after 500 days in captivity. He was taken as a hostage alive and came back dead. That's his handprint outside of the safe room in his house. I had no idea that this hand belonged to him. Nir Oz is a huge tragedy. First thing, it's a small kibbutz, about 400 members, that lost 25% of the members of the kibbutz that were either killed or kidnapped that day. What is even not less dramatic than that is the fact that nobody came to save them. The Hamas and the looters entered the kibbutz. They kidnapped, they shot, they murdered, they raped, they burned, and they just left as nothing happened. By the time the army arrived to Nir Oz, there was nobody to save. The Hamas and the looters were already back in Gaza together with the hostages. These are the post boxes of the kibbutz, where you see the stickers of whoever was murdered or kidnapped on that day. Moving on to the Nova Festival, this was an ambulance that was literally on the spot where the first people who were wounded ran to the ambulance. I have no idea how 18 youngsters, men and women, squeezed inside this ambulance, where it was shot with an anti-tank missile that literally killed all of them. Even if we kind of separate the Nova Festival from the rest of this horrific day, we're talking only in the Nova of 364 people that were murdered and 44 that were taken hostage. That's besides about 30 soldiers and policemen who died on duty fighting the Hamas that arrived to the Nova Festival. At the end of the day, we're talking about youngsters who came to dance in a party. We already heard that in the sessions before. But you have to understand that the most horrific stories of brutal rape, of cutting off limbs, of burning a bunch of bodies at the same time, all of that took place in the Nova Festival. I came back to the Nova on October 7th of 24 at 6:29 in the morning, seeing families who came to hug the posters of their loved ones that were murdered that day. This is Tomer Zak. Tomer from Kisufim. I'm pretty sure you haven't heard her name before. And even Kisufim, which is a kibbutz that we hardly ever heard of Kisufim. They only have 17 people that were murdered and one that was taken hostage. It almost went out of the radar. But when I meet Tomer in the house, in this house, she tells me that her mother was killed here in the house. Her father was brutally killed. Her brother was killed here. Even the dog was killed. And the house is burned to the ground. And she lost everything. She's a 22-year-old who basically lost all her family. And I can assure you that there are so many stories like Tomer that we even didn't hear yet about. It's insane. I think that our collective memory at the end of the day will be put together from the stories of people like Tomer who tells their story and the stories of their families. And this is the legacy that we need to leave behind. I take responsibility on telling these stories. This is what I do 19 hours a day, 7 days a week for the last year and a half, documenting the people who suffered on October 7th and to tell their story. I think it's so important to leave this document behind after we are all gone, to leave something for history. Tomer asked to put the Israeli flag on top of the house where all her family was assassinated. This is a place where they collected 1,600 remains of vehicles that were collected from all over the Gaza envelope. It became kind of a symbol sense. And of course, the families of the hostages that I document almost on a daily basis to tell their story. The Hostages Square, which I come to very often, we see artists and people coming to do all kinds of sculptures and to tell the stories of the hostages. It's quite amazing how all three of us that were speaking here today are talking about the same subjects and even the same people. So I want to talk about Abigail that Guys just mentioned in one of his cartoons. Abigail was kidnapped while she was 3 years old. Her father, Ro'i Dan, was a friend of mine, a photographer working for Yediot Achronot newspaper, and he lives in Kfar Aza. He heard the sirens, took his cameras, and ran to the outskirts of the kibbutz to take some pictures. He was literally able to photograph the Hamas arriving on these parachute gliders that arrived into his own kibbutz. When he understood how big this event is, he ran back home. By the time he got back home, his wife was already murdered. Abigail ran towards him. He wanted to pick her up. She was in diapers. He got shot and fell dead. Abigail took herself underneath the body of her father, filled with his blood, ran to the neighbor's house, the Bordetz family, and was kidnapped with them into Gaza. Her brother and sister, which stayed at home in the room where the body of the mother was still lying there, they got into the closet, talking to some psychiatrists. Sorry. Okay, that's Abigail now. We're going to talk about it in a second. Talking to some psychiatrist that is in the north part of Israel, holding them on the phone for 12 hours until the rescue arrived and took these kids out of the house. This is the modern Holocaust of Israel, with the most horrific stories we've ever heard since the establishment of the Israeli state. After, when we kind of mentioned a year to the return of the hostages in the first round of December of 23, I went back to photograph the kids and to tell their story as well. And I photographed Emily Hunt, a 9-year-old that was kidnapped without her parents. She went to sleep at her friend's house, Hila, that we saw her doll on the one of the roads, the kibbutz, and they were kidnapped together. I photographed Yahel and Naveh Shoam from Be'eri. These two kids were kidnapped. It's 10 family members of Shoam family. 3 were murdered, 7 were kidnapped. The women and children came back in December of 23, and Tal Shoam, their father, arrived after 500 days. But look at the face of this girl who is who is 3 years old, that spent over 50 days in the tunnels of Hamas. I went back to photograph Agam Goldstein Almog. They're from Kfar Aza. When they were forced by Hamas to leave the house, Agam and Chen, her mother, with her 2 young brothers, they literally had to go over the bodies of Nadav and Yam, which is her father and her oldest sister. I asked her if she'd be willing to be photographed between their graves. I've done a story throughout the first year talking about the bravery and the people who became a symbol in these times. And one of the people I want to mention is Amit Susana. Amit was kidnapped from this house in Kfar Aza, the neighborhood of the youngsters that we saw before. I'm not sure if you've seen, but there's a very dramatic short film that you see her being kidnapped. About 8 or 10 gunmen literally taking her on the shoulder, walking outside of the kibbutz to the open fields where she was literally taking into Gaza. She's trying to fight them. She falls on the floor. They hit her like insane images of this footage of video. And when I asked her, why did you do this? Where did all this bravery come from? She told me she wanted to stop them, and by that time the army will arrive, but no one arrives, and she's been grabbed by the hair into Gaza. This is the house that she was kidnapped from, that is burned to the ground. And I think that probably I want to talk about this picture. We see Amit sitting on the burned bed where she was kidnapped in pajamas. Amit is literally the only one talking about the sexual abuse she went through while in captivity in Gaza. There were many, many events of rape on October 7th, unfortunately, of men and women, by the way. Unfortunately, they are no longer alive to tell their story. And Amit, with outstanding bravery, stood in front of crowd all over the world talking about the sexual abusement that she went through while being captive as hostage in Gaza. My second hero is Avida Bachar. Avida, which I've met by accident in the hospital, tells me a story which I could not believe, and I asked if he'd be willing to go back to his house in Be'eri to tell his story, and he immediately said yes. Avida, when they understand that there are Hamas terrorists entered the kibbutz, they got into the home shelter that they have in the house, together with Dana, his wife, and 2 kids, ages of 15 and 13. A few minutes later, the Hamas terrorists entered the house, shooting at the door. Both Avida and Carmel, his son, are wounded from these shots. They started burning the house. At some point, the air was so thick inside the shelter that they cut parts of the mattress, soaked it with urine and blood, and put on their faces to try to breathe through that because the smoke was so thick. At some point, the Hamas came out of the house, were able to open a small part of the window, and threw 2 grenades inside. They were all wounded by these grenades. The first to lose her life was Dana, the wife, and then Carmel right afterwards. Avida losing conscious in critical condition, and now Hagar, 13-year-old, is taking control over the situation, talking on the phone with Mada, which is the equivalent of the Red Cross in Israel, trying to stop the blood on the legs of her father. This scene took 17 hours. before soldiers arrived and took Avida through the window out. Nobody ever thought he could make it to the hospital, and Avida survived. He's full of holes. He's completely, and as you see, he lost his leg. And a few months ago, he asked to move the graves of Dana and Carmel to the soil of Be'eri. He returned to work in the kibbutz, and he wants to complete the rehabilitation of the kibbutz, and he will move back to live there whenever it will be possible. Extraordinary man. Our next hero is Ziv Abud. We saw her in the film just a while ago. This is the exact bomb shelter on the main road of the Gaza envelope that we've seen before. When I've heard Ziv's story, I asked her if she'd be willing to go back to the shelter to take her picture there. And not only that, her boyfriend was kidnapped literally from her hand. She was lying under the bodies of her nephew and his girlfriend for 6 hours until rescue arrived and they took him out of this bomb shelter. And when Elia, her boyfriend, was literally taken away from her and was kidnapped together with Hersh, and he returned after 505 days in Gaza. And when they did, Ziv called me and asked if I want to photograph them arriving home for the first time, and it was such an emotional event where you see him entering the house and he could not hold the tears, and there was a big celebration with a lot of prayers that took place that day, which was really so moving. And to see them reunite together after 505 days, he was in captivity. I've done many stories in hospitals to tell the stories of the wounded, both soldiers and civilians. I met Evyatar, who was fighting on October 7th. He was in critical condition, and I got to the hospital where you see he was moving from critical to one of the wards of the hospital, and his mother and brother came to greet him and give him a kiss. It's very complicated shooting in a hospital. You can imagine the back office of it is quite intense, where I have to work with PR people of the hospital and IDF spokesman as well, and to get the approval from the family. And so it's quite complicated. And the girl working for the PR of the hospital is, I hear her on the phone talking about a baby that is wounded and in the ward in the hospital. And I asked her, what is the story? I mean, I didn't even hear about a baby that is wounded. And she told me this unbelievable story, a family that was burned in the shelter in Kfar Aza. Both parents are still in coma, and the daughter, which is suffering from burns, is in a bad condition. And I asked her if I can photograph her, and she said, impossible. Don't even mention it, it's not going to happen. I go back to my office in the evening, and I called the head of the PR system of the hospital, explaining the necessity of telling these stories, of showing these pictures to the world. For some unbelievable reason, we've reached a place where half the world don't remember October 7th, and the other don't believe it really exists. And my role as a photojournalist is to tell the story of these people and to photograph them and to show the world what really happened here. And I'm begging her to talk to the family and giving me the permission to photograph them. And she calls the family and she gets back to me with a negative answer. She said, I'm sorry, they just won't allow it. And when I try to kind of push her more, she says, listen, I cannot talk to them again, but I'm willing to give you the phone number of the uncle and do your magic. Whatever you can get with them, I will approve. And so I did. And I asked Shirel, the uncle, if he'd be willing to meet me. And I come to the hospital, and we agreed that I photographed Yaeli, the baby, and I will not use the pictures before both parents are out of coma and will approve it with their own voice. So, so this is Yaeli. She's in big pain, and we had no idea it will take another 52 days before the parents wake up and will be willing to cooperate and to talk to me. And then I come to the hospital and I meet this amazing couple, Eli and Ariel, and I ask them if they'll be willing to allow me to document their rehabilitation. And I come to the hospital to tell their story every single day, to do a reportage telling the story of a family in rehabilitation. Her wounds are critical. She's suffering from burns in over 60% of her body. They, at some point, after a couple of months, they take a small apartment right in front of the Tel Shomer hospital because Eli is still hospitalized, but Yaeli and Ariel are just coming to the hospital on a daily basis, but going to sleep at home. Just imagine how complicated it is to do a bath to a 1.5-year-old where all the 3 family members are with bandages and pressure suits all over their bodies, but they're really giving me this amazing opportunity to tell their story and to see how all the family together is going through this rehabilitation process. And at some point I go, to the kindergarten with them where you see them playing and cheerfully. That's like 6 or 7 months. I think it's the first time I see them laughing. But just seeing the family from a distance, thinking what they went through. They were literally not even an inch from being killed, all 3 of them. At some point, Ariel tells me that they got brave enough and they want to go visit their house in Kfar Aza. And I joined them for that, to see them going into the burned house for the first time. It was quite shocking for them. I was quite amazed that they even found a few pictures and some magnets from their wedding that somehow survived. And the first time I met Ariel, he tells me that the Hamas, or the looters, whoever was, got into Kfar Aza, they threw a gas canister inside the house that was burning, and the house got in flames in seconds. And when we entered the house, he told me, this is it. It's right here. It's still in the middle of the house. Now, I'm standing with my back to the safe room in the house. All the house is in flames by now. They needed to cross this room to go through the other room where the door to the entrance of the house. When they got to the door, they hear in Arabic on the other side. The Hamas members are still there, and in a split second, they took a decision to run behind this room. Behind this wall, there's another room to the other side of the house, jumping out of the window, and by miracle, there was nobody there. They ran all the way down to the entrance of the kibbutz where they were taken to the hospital, and they were rescued. On October 7th, Eli was in a stage where she finished her medicine school, becoming a doctor, and she was in this transition period of internship. Thank you. And when that was known to the CEO of the hospital, he proposed her that the last part of her rehabilitation, she can finish her internship while still in the hospital. So for the last few months of her being hospitalized, she became a staff of the hospital where she spends half the time being a doctor and half the time being a patient in the same hospital, where she goes and treats her patients in the pressure suits that she has all over her body. And at some point, they took a decision that they're moving with all the community of Kfar Aza to a kibbutz in the south, and they want to retain, yeah, okay, and the last picture now. And it got aware of the fact that she's pregnant. And 2 months later, they called me when they were on the way to the hospital, and Iftach was born. And it's such an amazing ending to the story of giving some hope and seeking for a better future for the people of Israel, and to Eli and Ariel. Thank you very much.
I'll keep my closing remarks short. I just want to extend our deepest thanks to Yariv, to Guy, and to Ziv for their moving descriptions of how the situation has affected their creativity over the past year and a half, and for the work that they've been doing. The theme of this year's board is optimism, and it's a little bit difficult to be optimistic after what we've just witnessed. But I'll try to end on an optimistic note. On October 7th, we saw the absolute worst of humanity, but I'd like to think that since that time, and even on that day, we've also come to see the best of it in the people of Israel, in their resilience, and in all of you that have joined us here today, especially as well among the youth here in Israel that really mobilized since October 7th in every aspect of Israeli society. So I hope that ends on a little bit of a positive note. My name is Lidar Grovelazi. It has been an absolute honor and a privilege to be your host this week. And that concludes the final session of this year's board. Thank you so much for your participation, and we hope to see you again next year.